The night was dark and ominous as Queen Efia Yemisi, her young son Prince Emeka, and the loyal guard Jabari made their escape from the palace grounds. They moved swiftly and silently, their cloaks billowing in the cool breeze. The queen held Emeka, who was 3 years at the time, close to her chest, his small face buried in the crook of her neck. Jabari led the way, leading them through Azoria's forgotten trails, known only to those sworn to protect its legacy, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. They darted through narrow alleys and deserted streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might be recognized. Emeka stirred in his mother's arms, his sleepy eyes blinking up at her. "Mama, where are we going?" he asked, his voice small and confused. Efia Yemisi's heart clenched at the sound of her son's innocent question. She hugged him tighter, her voice a whisper in his ear. "We're going on a little adventure, my love. Just you, me, and Jabari." Jabari glanced back at them, his expression grim. "We must hurry, my queen. The longer we linger, the greater the risk. I fear we are already being pursued." The queen agreed and walked faster. They needed to escape. She had heard rumors of a plot and rising threats against them. Let's journey back to Ezoria Kingdom, where this perilous journey all began. Azoria was a prosperous kingdom rooted in ancient traditions, known for its lush rainforests and bustling marketplace. At its heart sat the magnificent royal palace, built with stone and marble which stood over the kingdom. It was an amazing building. The people of Azoria were awoke as usual, ready to begin another day under the wise and just rule of King Azubuike. King Azubuike had been on the throne for 2 decades, his reign marked by peace and prosperity. He was a fair and benevolent ruler, beloved by his subjects for his compassion and wisdom. Beside him stood his wife, Queen Emeka, whose kindness and grace were legendary throughout the land. They were blessed with 2 sons, Kayode and Kofi. The older son, Kayode, was charismatic but had a dark side. His ambition and arrogance often overshadowed his better qualities, causing the king no small amount of concern. He bragged about being the next in line for the throne, thinking it was his right just because he was born first. Kofi, the younger prince, embodied the virtues of a true leader. He was wise beyond his years, compassionate, and deeply committed to the well-being of Azoria's people. King Azubuike observed the actions of his sons closely. In Azoria, the laws of succession were clear. The king held the power to choose his heir, ensuring the future of the kingdom rested in capable hands. Tradition held that when a king had more than one son, he must choose wisely, considering not only birthright but also the potential for leadership and service to the kingdom. It was a decision that weighed heavily on Azubuike's mind as he watched his boys grow into men. The sun beat down upon the palace courtyard where King Azubuike walked with his advisor. "My king," the advisor began cautiously, "the people whisper about your successor. Time draws near for you to decide." King Azubuike nodded gravely. "I am growing older and weaker. I have watched both my sons grow. Kayode has strength and charisma but lacks the wisdom and temperance necessary to lead. Kofi embodies our traditions and values. He shows judgment beyond his years. He treats the palace staff with kindness." The advisor bowed his head in agreement. "And so, will it be Kofi who shall follow in your footsteps?" King Azubuike raised a hand to silence him. "Speak not of this yet. There are those who would use such knowledge for their own gain." He thought of Kayode then, his firstborn, who wore ambition like a second skin. "Call for a meeting with the elders tomorrow, so I reveal my decision to them. The time is now," King Azubuike ordered. "Okay, my king, I will see to it." The next day, as the sun rose over Azoria, King Azubuike gathered the elders in the grand council chamber. The room was filled with an air of anticipation, the elders whispering among themselves, wondering why the king had summoned them so urgently. The king walked into the room, his long gown dragging on the ground behind him. He looked very serious. King Azubuike sat down in his special chair at the front of the table. He looked around at all the men he relied on the most. "My loyal elders," he began, his voice deep and resonant, "I have called you here today to discuss a matter of great importance. As you know, the time has come for me to choose my successor." The elders nodded, leaning forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the king. "I have watched my sons grow into men," King Azubuike continued, "and I have seen the qualities they possess. Kayode, my firstborn, has strength and charisma, but he lacks the wisdom and temperance necessary to lead our people. Kofi, my younger son, embodies our traditions and values. He shows judgment beyond his years and treats all with kindness and respect." The elders murmured their agreement, nodding their heads in approval. "And so," King Azubuike declared, "I have made my decision. Kofi shall be my successor, the next king of Azoria." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the king's words settling over them. Then, one by one, the elders stood and bowed their heads in respect, acknowledging the wisdom of their king's choice. But as they filed out of the council chamber, whispers began to circulate. Not everyone was happy with the king's decision. Some felt that Kayode, as the firstborn, had been wronged. Others feared that Kofi was young and inexperienced to lead the kingdom. And then there was Kayode himself. When he heard the news, his face twisted in rage. He stormed into his father's chambers, his voice shaking with fury. "How could you do this to me?" he demanded. "I am your firstborn, your rightful heir." King Azubuike stood firm, his eyes meeting his son's with unwavering resolve. "It is not about birthright, Kayode. It is about who is best suited to lead our people, and that is Kofi." Kayode's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening. "You will regret this, father. I swear it." King Azubuike's face softened as he looked at his enraged son. He placed a hand on Kayode's shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "My son, I have tried to guide you, to help you become the leader our people need. Do you remember the countless times I have urged you to turn away from your womanizing and other vile acts? How often have I warned you against boastfulness, encouraging you to be kind and humble?" Kayode shrugged off his father's hand, his eyes blazing with fury. "And what good has that done? You have always favored Kofi, always seen him as the better son." King Azubuike shook his head, his expression pained. "It's not about favoritism, Kayode. It's about the future of our kingdom and its reputation. I have to think about what is best for our people." The king's words only seemed to fuel Kayode's anger. He paced the room like a caged animal, his hands clenched into fists. "And you think Kofi is what's best? He's weak, father. He doesn't have the strength to lead." "Strength comes in many forms," King Azubuike countered, his voice rising slightly. "Kofi has the wisdom, the compassion, and the integrity to be a great king. Why can't you see that?" Kayode let out a harsh laugh. "Because I know the truth. You've always seen me as a disappointment, a failure. Well, I'll show you, father. I'll show you all." "You have disgraced me, father. What will I tell my friends when they hear I wasn't the chosen one for the throne? I will make sure I prove you all wrong." King Azubuike's eyes widened at the venom in his son's words. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched. "Kayode, please, try to calm down. Work with your brother for the betterment of the kingdom. Together you could—" But Kayode was no longer listening. He turned on his heel and stalked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the palace halls. King Azubuike watched him go, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. He feared what dark plans his firstborn might be hatching in the shadows of the palace. King Azubuike's heart was heavy as he turned to his wife, Queen Emeka, who stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. Her touch was a comfort, a reminder that he was not alone in this difficult decision. "You have made the right choice, my love," Emeka said softly, her voice filled with unwavering support. "Kofi will be a great king." Azubuike agreed, holding back his emotions. "I hope so too. It's a heavy decision and task, but the ancestors will see him through." As the evening descended upon the palace, King Azubuike summoned Prince Kofi to his private chamber. The young prince entered, his steps measured and his head held high, ready to face whatever his father had to say. The king looked at his son, feeling both happy and sad at the same time. He knew the weight of the words he was about to speak, the gravity of the responsibility he was about to place upon Kofi's shoulders. "My son," Azubuike began, his voice thick with emotion, "you must prepare yourself. The future of our kingdom will rest upon your shoulders." He held Kofi's gaze, his eyes conveying the seriousness of the moment. "Your brother's path leads away from what is righteous for Azoria." Kofi bowed deeply, his heart swelling with a sense of duty and purpose. "I will serve with all my heart," he vowed, his voice steady and strong. Azubuike placed his hands on Kofi's shoulders, his grip firm yet gentle. "I urge you to work with your brother when you attain the throne. Never see this as a victory over your elder brother. You know, son, this decision is the hardest I have ever made. I know you won't let me down. The ancestors will see you through." The king's voice grew softer, more urgent. "Also, never trust anyone fully in this palace. The shadows grow longer with each passing day. I know trust is your weakness. Just be careful, son. If you want to trust anyone, it has to be Jabari. He has been very loyal to me and my family. I took him in when he was little." Azubuike's eyes glistened with tears as he continued, his voice wavering slightly. "I am getting weaker and weaker as the days go by. I want you to be a good king and continue my legacy." Kofi nodded, his own eyes brimming with emotion. "Thank you, father. I will do as you say." The king pulled his son into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around Kofi as if he never wanted to let go. Tears streamed down both their faces as they held each other, the weight of the moment settling upon them like a heavy mantle. Azubuike sighed heavily, the weight of his decision bearing down upon him. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he had faith in Kofi's ability to navigate them. Coyote stormed into his chambers, his face contorted with rage. The walls seemed to tremble as he slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the palace halls. He paced the room like a caged lion, his fists clenched, his eyes blazing with fury. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. "Enter!" he growled, his voice dripping with venom. The door creaked open, revealing the face of Kwamina, Kayode's childhood friend. Kwamina stepped into the room, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "What troubles you, my friend?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Kayode whirled around, his eyes locking onto Kwamina's. "My father," he spat, each word laced with bitterness. "He has chosen Kofi as his successor, Kofi the weak, the undeserving." Kwamina's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He moved closer to Kayode, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Calm down, my friend. You know we go way back, and I don't like to see you in a state of despair." Kayode's eyes narrowed, breathing hard and fast with rage. Kwamina grabbed his shoulder, holding on tight to comfort him. "Relax," Kwamina continued, his voice smooth as silk. "Don't let your brother see you hate him. No way. Continue to show feigned love towards him. Let him win your trust. It's part of the plan. Blood, trust the process. Kayode's breathing slowed, his eyes searching Kwamina's face. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Kwamina continued, "Forget about the old man for now. When he dies and Kofi is crowned as the king, we will unleash the master plan. Together, we'll ensure you get what's rightfully yours. You feel me, Blood?" Kayode's eyes widened, a glimmer of understanding dawning on his face. "I feel you, Blood," he responded, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. Kwamina's expression turned serious, his eyes boring into Kayode's. "No matter what, don't be too driven by your emotion to go off track. I need you to keep your emotion in check," he warned, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. Coyote agreed, his face showing he was very serious about their plan. The room felt full of a scary, powerful feeling, like something big and bad was going to happen. Kwamina looked around the fancy room, noticing all the expensive decorations and furniture. He was just visiting the palace, but now it seemed like it was meant to be, like destiny brought him there for an important reason. As the two men stood in the dimly lit chamber, their faces cast in shadows, a sense of foreboding settled over the room. The palace, once a beacon of light and hope, now seemed to hold dark secrets in its very walls. Today is a happy day. Prominent guests from all corners of the kingdom and beyond have gathered for an important event, their colorful garments adding vibrancy to the already lively atmosphere. The day of Kofi and Efia Yemisi's wedding had finally arrived, and the entire Ezoria Kingdom was buzzing with excitement. The palace was adorned with vibrant flowers and colorful fabrics, creating a festive atmosphere that seemed to permeate every corner of the land. As Efia Yemisi gracefully walked down the aisle, her smile shone with happiness and anticipation, embodying both grace and beauty. Kofi couldn't help but marvel at her radiant presence. He knew he was the luckiest man alive to have found a woman like Efia, a woman who was not only physically beautiful, but also kind-hearted, intelligent, and possessed of a resilient inner strength. As they stood at the altar before King Azubuike, who looked frail yet proud despite illness and old age, the young couple exchanged vows of love, devotion, and support, their voices infused with the weight of their commitment. The old king gazed at the prince and his bride, feeling very happy and peaceful. He knew the kingdom would be well taken care of by the smart prince, his caring wife, and their future child, who would one day be king or queen. King Azubuike felt incredibly lucky to see this important day. He stood in front of the couple, his eyes shining with pride and happiness as he put his hands on their heads, asking the spirits of their ancestors to bless them. "I pray that your marriage will bring many children, like our lands bring many crops, and that your love will last as long as the mountains that surround and protect our kingdom." Queen Mother Amaka's happiness shone as brightly as the sun. She wrapped her future daughter-in-law in an embrace full of maternal love, softly whispering words of encouragement and support. The guests cheered and applauded as Kofi slid the ring onto Efia's finger, and she did the same for him. As their gazes met in that happy instant, they sensed an unseen tie wrapping around them, vowing to keep them together through all of life's ups and downs. During the happy celebration, one person was missing. Prince Kayode, filled with jealousy and anger, had decided to be alone rather than see his brother's joy. He stood far away on a balcony, hidden behind hanging plants. Kwamina edged closer, a playful spark in his gaze. "Did he snatch your lady as well?" he joked, wrapping a comforting arm around Kayode's tensed shoulders. "Your brother Kofi has truly perfected the art of stealing." They both laughed in a playful manner. "At least I managed to put a smile on your face. Don't worry," Kwamina continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Like I said, let's stick to the master plan and all will be yours in no time. Thank you, my ever-loyal friend. Thank you for always being there for me. What are brothers for? I will always be there for you. Now watch as we emerge victorious together," Kwamina assured him. Below them in the garden, Efia Yemisi shone like a beacon of hope and beauty, her white gown flowing gracefully around her, her skin glowing with happiness. She looked into Kofi's eyes, seeing the love and adoration reflected back at her. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the day she would become his wife and stand by his side as the future queen of Azoria. As guests toasted to new beginnings and a prosperous future for Kofi and Efia Yemisi, Kayode's gaze lingered on the couple. Despite Kwamina's assurances, something gnawed at him, a silent acknowledgement of what he had lost to his own ambitions. As the guests began to sing praises, chanting, "Hail our future king! Hail our future king!" Kayode departed from the scene, seething with anger. A year after their joyous union, Efia Yemisi and Kofi welcomed their first child, Emeka. The birth of the young prince brought immense happiness to the royal family and the entire kingdom. King Azubuike, though his health was declining, found great joy in holding his newborn grandson in his arms. It was a moment of hope and promise for the future of Azoria. Tragically, only a few months after Emeka's birth, King Azubuike passed away. A profound sadness descended upon the Ezoria Kingdom. King Azubuike, the beloved ruler who had guided his people with wisdom and compassion, drew his last breath. The news of his passing rippled through the land like a mournful wind, touching the hearts of every citizen. In his final moments, King Azubuike had held his grandson in his arms, his eyes glistening with pride and love. The sight of the newborn prince had brought a smile to his weathered face, even though his health was declining. It was as if he had been holding on, waiting for this moment, to see the continuity of his lineage before he could depart in peace. The Queen Mother, Amaka, was next to the bed of the king, holding his hand firmly. She was crying as she softly spoke loving and thankful words to him, appreciating their joyful years together and the wonderful family they had made. Kofi and Kayode were close by, looking very sad as they watched their amazing father and great king pass away. As the news of King Azubuike's death spread, the kingdom was plunged into mourning. The streets, once filled with laughter and chatter, fell silent. Flags were lowered to half-mast, and black cloths draped the windows of every home. The people of Azoria gathered in the palace courtyard, their faces stained with tears as they paid their respects to their fallen leader. The funeral was a grand affair, befitting a ruler of Azubuike's stature. Dignitaries from far and wide came to bid him farewell, their faces etched with sorrow. In the midst of the sorrow, a glimmer of hope emerged. Kofi, now the rightful heir to the throne, was officially enthroned as the King of Ezoria Kingdom. The coronation ceremony was a somber affair, tinged with both sadness and anticipation. As the crown was placed upon Kofi's head, the people of Azoria looked to him with expectant eyes, knowing that he would carry on his father's legacy. Efia Yemisi stood by Kofi's side, her presence a pillar of strength and support. She held their son close to her heart, a symbol of the future that lay ahead. Together, they would navigate the challenges of leadership and guide the kingdom towards a brighter tomorrow. As the sun set on that somber day, the kingdom of Azoria found itself at a crossroads. The passing of King Azubuike marked the end of an era, but the birth of Prince Emeka and the ascension of King Kofi signaled a new beginning. The people, united in their grief and their hope, looked to the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They trusted in Kofi's ability to lead them forward, to honor his father's memory, and to build upon the foundation of peace and prosperity that King Azubuike had laid. As Kofi and Efia Yemisi settled into their new roles, they faced the challenges of leadership together, their love for each other and their people growing stronger with each passing day. However, even amidst the responsibilities of ruling, Efia Yemisi couldn't help but notice a change in Kofi's health. At first, she attributed it to the stress of his new position, but as time passed, it became clear that something more serious was at play. Physicians were summoned and hushed conversations were held behind closed doors, but no remedy seemed to touch the mysterious illness that plagued the king. As Kofi's health continued to deteriorate, whispers of unrest began to circulate throughout the palace. King Kofi lay in his chambers, his face pale and his body weak. The illness had taken a toll on him, leaving him a mere shadow of his former self. In the past few years, he had been a good leader for Azoria following the legacy King Azubuike left behind, but his health keeps getting worse. As he struggled to sit up, a knock on the door announced the arrival of his brother Kayode. "Hey brother, how are you holding up? This illness is really taking a toll on you, isn't it?" Kayode asked as he stepped into the room, his brow furrowed with worry. Kofi managed a weak smile. "The doctors couldn't even diagnose the root cause of my illness," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But Kayode, my brother, I want to thank you for the support you've been giving me since I was enthroned as the King of Ezoria Kingdom. You've truly showed immense support." Coyote nodded, his expression solemn. "It saddens my heart to hear you speak like this, brother. I know you will be well very soon, I promise." Kofi reached out and grasped his brother's hand. "I want you to sit in as the king and help Ezoria Kingdom for the time being as I work on gaining back my health. I will speak to the council elders about my decision." Coyote held his brother's hand tightly, nearly crying. "I will do everything in my power to ensure the kingdom thrives in your absence, brother. Rest assured, Azoria will be in good hands." Kayode walked out of the room, looking serious on the outside. But inside, he felt a small flame of happiness. The master plan was unfolding just as he had hoped, each piece falling into place like a well-crafted puzzle. Moments later, Efia Yemisi and young Emeka entered the chamber, their faces streaked with tears. They rushed to Kofi's bedside, their sobs echoing through the room as they witnessed the once strong king reduced to a frail figure. Kofi mustered a smile for his wife and son, his love for them shining through the pain. He reached out, his trembling hand caressing Emeka's cheek. "My son," he whispered, "you are the future of Azoria. Be strong, be wise, and always remember the love your mother and I have for you." Efia Yemisi held Kofi's other hand, her tears falling freely. "Please, my love, you must fight this illness. Azoria needs you. We need you." Kofi closed his eyes, his breathing shallow. "I will always be with you, even if I am not here in body. Our love, our bond is eternal." Emeka's eyes, wide and trusting, looked up at his father. "Daddy, don't be sad. You will be fine, okay? Mom, Grandma, and I have been praying for you to get better." Kofi drew his son into a gentle embrace, his strength waning but his love unwavering. "Thank you, my son. Come here, my boy. You are my hope. You will one day become a good king. Remember, Daddy loves you, okay?" Just then, Jabari burst into the room, his face etched with urgency. He pulled Efia Yemisi aside, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My queen, I overheard a dark conspiracy. There is a plot to eliminate Prince Emeka when the king dies. It's Kayode who's behind it. He's convinced some of the royal guards to conspire with him. Efia Yemisi's eyes widened in horror, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. She glanced at Kofi, who lay weak and helpless on the bed, unable to protect his family. Efia Yemisi, tears streaming down her face, rushed to Kofi's bedside. She relayed Jabari's warning, her voice trembling with fear. Kofi, his face etched with sorrow, spoke in a low, urgent tone. "My love, you must trust Jabari. He will keep you and Emeka safe. Escape to the neighboring village of Mambiza. Find Mama Chioma and tell her I sent you. She will help you." "But what about you, my king?" Efia Yemisi cried, clutching his hand. Kofi caressed her hand tenderly. "Don't worry about me, my love. Your well-being and Emeka's are what matter most now." He turned to Jabari with a resolute gaze. "Remember, Emeka is Ezoria's only hope." Efia Yemisi nodded through her tears as Kofi gave his final warning. "Trust no one else in the palace at the moment. Jabari is your only ally in this dark time." Jabari knelt before his king, his voice thick with emotion. "Your Majesty, your trust honors me more than words can say. I pledge my life to protect your family, my king. I will not fail you." In a shadowy corner of the palace, Kayode and Uche, the royal maiden tasked with serving the king's food, engaged in a hushed conversation. Uche's role in the master plan was crucial. She was to slowly poison Kofi's meals, weakening him day by day until his inevitable demise. Kayode pulled Uche close, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Our plan is going perfectly. I'm so close to becoming the king of Azoria, and you, my love, will be my queen." Uche smiled, her heart racing at the thought of the power and prestige that awaited them. They embraced, their forbidden love growing more intense with each passing day. Little did Uche know that to Kayode, she was nothing more than a pawn in his twisted game. With each passing day, as Kofi grew weaker, Kayode's grip on power tightened, and the future of Azoria hung in the balance. As night fell, Jabari, Efia Yemisi, and young Emeka prepared to flee the palace under the cover of darkness. Their hearts raced as they gathered what little they could carry, knowing that every shadow could conceal an enemy. The weight of their task hung heavy in the air, but they were determined to survive, to keep the hope of Azoria alive in the young prince. With one last look at the only home they had ever known, they slipped into the night, their footsteps soft against the cold stone. The future was uncertain, but they clung to each other, to the love and loyalty that bound them together. And so began their journey into the unknown, a desperate bid for survival against the dark forces that sought to destroy them. Efia Yemisi's heart raced as she held Emeka close, her eyes scanning the palace's shadowy alleys. Jabari led, hand on his sword hilt, ready to defend them. The weight of being hunted hung heavy. Turning a corner, they faced a dead end. Trapped. "This way," Jabari whispered urgently, gesturing to a narrow gap, and they squeezed through into a small courtyard, breathing ragged. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them, the steady rhythm growing louder, closer. Jabari whirled around, his sword drawn in a flash of steel, pushing the queen and prince behind him. A figure emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a hood, his intentions unknown. "Who goes there? What do you want? Show yourself, or face the wrath of my sword," Jabari demanded, his voice low and menacing, his stance unwavering in the face of this new threat. Efia Yemisi held Emeka tighter, her body shielding him from the potential danger, who looked up at her innocently, unaware of the peril. The hooded figure took a step forward, his movements slow, deliberate. Jabari tightened his grip on his sword, ready to strike at the first sign of aggression. The tension in the air was palpable, the silence broken only by the pounding of their hearts and the distant sounds of the palace coming to life, unaware of the drama unfolding in its hidden corners.